I never thought betrayal could come from the people who raised me. At 2 in the morning, my father's voice shattered the silence. "You're an embarrassment. Don't come home." His words cut deeper than any stranger's insult. For years, I gave them everything: money, support, loyalty, believing family meant safety. But on my mother's birthday, something unexpected happened. My sister's boyfriend locked eyes with me, smiled, and said 2 words that froze the room. "Hi, boss." In that instant, secrets cracked wide open, and I realized the people I trusted most had built their lives on lies. It was exactly 2:03 a.m. when my phone lit up with my father's name. My chest tightened the way it always did when he called late at night. I answered anyway, even though I knew no good ever came from these moments. His voice was sharp, venom laced with authority. "You're an embarrassment. Don't come home tomorrow. You'll ruin your mother's birthday." The words stung, but this time I didn't hang up. I steadied my breath, just like my therapist had taught me. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds held, 8 seconds out. My hand trembled against the phone, but I kept my voice calm. "What are you afraid of, Dad?" I asked quietly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then he scoffed and muttered something about me, always making scenes before hanging up. The screen went dark, leaving me alone with the hollow ache in my chest. I sat on the edge of my bed, feeling the surge of old familiar guilt trying to swallow me. For years, I had given them everything: my money, my time, my emotional labor. I paid my sister's rent when she lost her job, covered my father's medical bills when his insurance ran out, and helped my mother navigate the mess of her depression. I thought that was what family meant: sacrifice without question. But the older I grew, the more I saw the patterns repeating. My father's rages always ended with me apologizing. My sister's endless crises always ended with me footing the bill. My mother's silence always left me alone in the middle of chaos, begging for scraps of affection. The therapist once told me there were 7 classic signs of emotional manipulation I should watch for. At the time, I dismissed it. Now at 2:15 a.m., staring at the cracked paint on my bedroom wall, I could name them all. Gaslighting, the way Dad rewrote history, insisting I had imagined his cruelty. Guilt tripping, the way my sister cried that I didn't love her enough whenever I said no. Isolation, the constant discouragement from bringing friends to family events because strangers don't need to see our business. Financial drain, the steady stream of money I handed over that was never repaid. Emotional blackmail, the threats to cut me off entirely if I didn't comply. Information control, the secrets about inheritance whispered behind closed doors, never to be shared with me. And finally, love bombing, the sudden bursts of affection, the rare "we're proud of you" after years of silence, always just enough to pull me back in. I had scrolled past these warnings in books, articles, even online forums. I told myself my family was different. They weren't abusers, they were just stressed, misunderstood, unlucky. That was the lie I swallowed to keep functioning. The truth hit harder when I opened my phone and scrolled through social media. My sister had posted a photo collage only hours earlier. Mom smiling in the kitchen, Dad raising a glass, my sister hugging her boyfriend. A caption read, "Family is everything, can't wait to celebrate tomorrow." But in each frame, I was missing. Cropped out, cut away, as if I had never existed. They didn't even pretend anymore. For a second, I wanted to scream. to flood the comment section with the reality of what they had done to me. But instead, I remembered my therapist's words: pause, feel, don't react immediately. So I let myself drift into a memory. I was 12, standing barefoot in our kitchen. My mother had placed a gentle hand on my shoulder as I clattered dishes too loudly. "Quiet, Emily," she whispered. "Your father's resting. Let's not disturb him." She smiled softly, as if protecting me, as if teaching me survival. That was the last time I remembered her truly standing between me and his anger. That memory steadied me now, not because it excused her silence, but because it reminded me of my own tenderness. I was not cold steel. I was not a soldier. I was a woman who had endured, and that mattered. Still, endurance had its limits. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. They had banished me with words, erased me from pictures, and stolen my peace of mind. Yet something inside me shifted as I stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was Mom's birthday. They expected me to vanish quietly, humiliated, obedient. But I would not disappear. I whispered to myself, "I'm going." And I knew I wouldn't walk into that house alone. The moment I stepped through the doorway, the air in the living room shifted. The decorations sparkled with balloons and streamers, laughter echoing faintly. But when eyes landed on me, the sound died. Conversations froze, smiles faltered, and the silence pressed down like a heavy blanket. My father stood near the cake, his hand tightening around a glass, as though my presence had contaminated the party. My sister wouldn't even look at me. I became invisible, and yet unbearably visible all at once. I forced myself to walk forward, every step weighted with defiance and fear. I greeted no one, and no one greeted me. They all looked away, pretending I hadn't arrived, except for one pair of eyes that finally met mine. My sister's boyfriend, standing just behind her, glanced at me. Then he smiled. "Hi, boss," he said, voice steady, carrying across the silent room. A collective gasp rippled through the air. For a heartbeat, no one moved. My sister whipped around, her face draining of color. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's eyes widened as though she had just been slapped. In that instant, the balance of power shifted. The man they thought was merely her boyfriend had revealed something they had tried so hard to bury. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't an embarrassment. I was a boss, a leader, someone they could no longer dismiss with a sneer. The silence grew unbearable. My throat tightened, tears threatening, but I pressed my nails into my palm until the sting steadied me. I caught my mother's eye and, without speaking, lifted my hand just slightly, curling my fingers into a small private signal, an okay sign. She blinked, almost imperceptibly, and I wondered if she understood. I wasn't here to fight her. I wasn't here to destroy her. I was here to survive the truth. Then, out of nowhere, the flat-screen television on the wall flickered. Someone had left the subtitles setting on, and the automated captions tried to catch up with the fragments of conversation still hanging in the air. For one haunting second, the words displayed weren't just embarrassment. The subtitles glitched, shifted, and then spelled out a new word: embezzlement. The room collectively inhaled. My father cursed under his breath and reached for the remote, shutting the TV off in one swift motion. I stood still. The image of those letters burned into my memory. Later that night, when I finally slipped into the kitchen to escape the suffocating room, I noticed a man in his 20s leaning against the counter, phone in hand. He wasn't family, just a friend of a friend invited to the party. His screen lit up, and I saw my own face reflected. He was watching a TikTok clip, me standing there, my sister's boyfriend saying, "Hi, boss." The caption read, "When family drama meets corporate life." The video had already racked up thousands of views. By the time the cake was cut, the clip had exploded. The algorithm was ruthless with scandal. Every refresh showed more likes, more comments, more strangers dissecting the two words that had cracked my family facade wide open. And my family knew it. The whispers began immediately. My sister hissed to anyone who would listen that I had planned this, that I had tricked her boyfriend into humiliating her. My father told relatives that I was obsessed with tearing the family apart, painting himself as the victim of my cruelty. My mother said nothing, her silence cutting deeper than their words. I wanted to scream back, to show everyone the truth of what they had done to me over the years. But I didn't. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing everything I observed, snippets of conversations, the exact words my father used, the dates and times. When someone muttered about inheritance, I discreetly snapped a photo of the whispered huddle. I recorded short audio clips when their accusations grew louder, hiding the phone in my pocket. My therapist had once told me, not every battle is won by fighting. Sometimes survival is strategy. Tonight, I chose silence. What about you? If you were in my shoes, would you lash out, or would you collect your evidence in silence? Hours later, as the party wound down, I slipped away without goodbyes. My chest burned with restrained fury, but my hands held proof, photos, recordings, pieces of the puzzle they never thought I would gather. When I reached my car, I checked my phone again. Among the TikTok notifications and endless comments, one email subject line stopped me cold. Inheritance draft, revised copy. It was from an anonymous sender. My stomach lurched as I opened it. Inside was a PDF attachment, a will half-finished with my name crossed out. The message was clear. They hadn't just erased me from photos, they were erasing me from the family's future. The anonymous email haunted me all night. By dawn, I was sitting at my desk, my laptop open, the glow of the screen painting. Shadows across the room. The document was more than a will. It was a blueprint of betrayal. Buried in its metadata were edits, timestamps, and notes that told their own story. My father's name appeared as the primary editor. My sister's account had left traces too. They had been working together for months, altering legal draft to strip me away, piece by piece. I followed the trail further, digging through file properties and hidden notes. My hands shook as I uncovered a string of attached audio files, clearly meant as proof of agreement. One file opened to a voice that chilled me. It was my own voice, calm and steady, saying, "I relinquish my share. Family comes first." But I never said those words. The realization sank like ice into my stomach. They had used artificial intelligence, some cheap but convincing deepfake software, to fabricate my consent. My own father had manufactured my betrayal, forging not only documents but my voice. The irony was cruel. For years he had told me I was imagining things, gaslighting me until I doubted myself. Now he had literally created a false version of me to erase the real one. I closed my eyes, leaning back in the chair, feeling the tremor in my chest. In my next therapy session later that day, I finally admitted something I had resisted. "I don't want to destroy my mother," I told my therapist. "She is silent, yes, but she is also trapped. If there is any way to save her from this, I want to try." My therapist nodded slowly. Holding compassion and strategy together is not weakness, it's humanity. Use it. Those words grounded me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for truth, and maybe even for her. That evening, a new message arrived in my inbox. The subject line read simply, "Listen carefully, no sender name, just a file." Against my better judgment, I played it. It was my father's voice, unaltered and raw. "She doesn't deserve a cent. Cross her name out. If she fights back, we'll say she agreed months ago. The deepfake will hold in court." A pause, then my sister's voice cut in. "And if she calls us out?" His response, "No one will believe her. Not after the smear campaign." The recording ended abruptly. My pulse thundered in my ears. Whoever had sent this wasn't my enemy. It was someone on the inside. I wasn't alone. The next day, I began building a team. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in wills and inheritance law, a man known for dismantling fraudulent cases. Then I reached out to a digital forensics expert, someone who could not only expose deepfakes, but trace their origin. A financial advisor agreed to help me map the money trail. My therapist, of course, remained part of my circle. She kept me steady when fear threatened to unravel me. Finally, I called my mother's sister, my Aunt Grace, the only relative who had ever shown me quiet kindness. One by one, they agreed to stand with me, not as soldiers in a war, but as guardians of truth. We created a secure channel to communicate, away from family eyes. Every document, every screenshot, every audio file went into a digital vault. Aunt Grace gave me a leather-bound notebook. "Write everything down," she said. "Dates, names, actions. When the lies begin, your record will keep the truth alive." I began referring to the project in my notes, but it felt too cold to just call it evidence. So let me ask you, what name would you give to this mission? A campaign of light against their darkness. Something like Project Lighthouse, perhaps? As the days passed, the puzzle began to fit together. The lawyer explained how the fraudulent will could collapse in court once exposed. The forensic expert decoded the layers of the audio, showing me the synthetic fingerprints that proved my voice had been faked. The financial advisor mapped the flow of money from my father's accounts to shadow companies tied to my sister's name. Each discovery gave me strength. Then Aunt Grace leaned closer one evening, her voice a whisper. "Emily, you need to know something about the wedding." I frowned. "What about it?" "The venue's sound system connects automatically. If someone plugs in a device through HDMI and the microphone is live, the feed will play across every screen. Every guest will see it." Her eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "If you want the truth to break free, that's your moment." My breath caught. The thought of exposing everything in front of hundreds of people terrified me. But the idea also sent a surge of fire through my veins. It was no longer just about defending myself. It was about showing the world what they had done. The wedding wasn't just a celebration anymore. It was a battlefield waiting for me. The church smelled faintly of roses and wax. Guests filled the pews, murmuring with excitement, unaware of the storm building beneath the polished surface. I sat quietly at the end of a row, hands folded, the picture of composure. My dress was modest, my hair pinned neatly. I wasn't here to sabotage my sister's wedding. I was here to wait. The ceremony unfolded with perfect choreography. My father looked proud, his hand resting on my sister's shoulder, as if he hadn't spent months conspiring against me. My mother's eyes drifted toward me now and then, her expression unreadable. When the officiant called for the vows, I drew a slow breath. My hand brushed against the small device hidden in my purse. Aunt Grace's words echoed in my mind. When the mic is live, the screens will follow. My sister's voice wavered as she began her vows. The microphone carried her words through the speakers. At that precise moment, I tapped the device. The HDMI signal latched onto the system, and the screens behind the altar flickered once, twice, then bloomed with images. The first photo was simple, the family group chat with my name crossed out. Then screenshots of messages, my father sneering about cutting her out, my sister agreeing to make sure she gets nothing. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The officiant tried to speak, but the feed rolled on. Next came the bank transfers. Thousands funneled into shell accounts, my sister's name coded into the transaction notes. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My father's face turned gray. Finally, the audio files began. A voice, my voice, declaring I had given up my inheritance. But then the forensic breakdown followed. Lines of data across the screen, exposing the deepfake signature. And then the twist none of them expected. Metadata traced back to my sister's best friend, a digital artist who had created the file under my father's instruction. The room erupted. The groom's family shifted uneasily. My sister clutched her bouquet like a weapon, whispering fiercely to my father. My mother stared at the screen, her lips trembling. I didn't gloat. I simply looked at the bride, the sister who once held me when I lost my first job, who whispered then, "You'll be okay, Em. I've got you." That memory cut deeper than the betrayal. For a moment, I wished it had been true. The officiant stumbled, the ceremony crumbling under the weight of exposure. In the chaos, the microphone slipped into the groom's hand. He turned toward my sister, his voice caught by the speakers. I can't sign this," he whispered. The words carried like a dagger through the church. Silence fell, sharper than any scream. Later, after guests spilled into the courtyard buzzing with shock, the smear campaign began in earnest. My father barked at relatives, insisting I had staged the whole thing. My sister sobbed loudly to anyone who would listen, claiming I had sabotaged her happiest day. Their story spread quickly, desperate to bury the truth under noise, but my team was ready. By nightfall, the independent audit was live online. Reports from forensic experts, certified voice analysis proving the deepfake. TikTok clips merged the wedding feed with evidence packets. Every accusation they made collapsed under the weight of documented proof. I didn't post any of it myself. My lawyer handled every submission, every disclosure. The trail was clean, legal, and airtight. If they came after me for slander, they would find themselves in court against facts they couldn't erase. In the quiet of my hotel room that night, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from my mother. 2 words glowed on the screen. "I'm sorry." For a long moment, I just stared at it. My throat ached, but I typed back, "I'll wait for you to tell the truth." Then I set the phone down, the ache in my chest softening into something less sharp. But peace didn't last. Hours later, another message came from her number. This time it was an invitation. "Meet me tomorrow. I have something to give you." Attached was a photo of a worn leather notebook, edges frayed, pages yellowed. My father's handwriting filled the lines. The past wasn't done speaking. The fallout came swiftly. Within days of the wedding, my father's business associates began pulling out of deals. Phone calls went unanswered, contracts were voided, and whispers of fraud rippled through his circles. The video evidence had gone viral, dissected by strangers and experts alike. The world now knew what I had always lived. Behind his polished exterior was a man who built his power on lies. The investigation widened. Financial auditors uncovered transfers far beyond what I had found. Hidden accounts surfaced, shell corporations unraveled. And then came the most devastating revelation. The fund my father claimed was dedicated to my grandmother's medical care. Money donated by relatives, friends, even neighbors, had been siphoned for years. It wasn't just inheritance theft anymore. It was exploitation of the most vulnerable member of our family. When this detail leaked, there was no salvaging his reputation. Even his staunchest defenders recoiled. My sister, once set to co-sign property deals and inherit businesses, was stripped of those rights under legal injunction. The groom's family terminated the marriage contract, citing irreparable deception. The wedding that was meant to bind two families had become a cautionary tale whispered across town. Through it all, I kept my distance. The evidence spoke for itself, and the law carried the weight I could not. My role was no longer to fight in the shadows, but to stay steady, to let the truth breathe. One morning, I picked up my mother and drove her to a doctor's appointment. She sat quietly beside me, hands folded in her lap, fragile in a way I had never noticed before. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the car. Finally, she spoke. "I signed the papers, Emily." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "What papers?" Her voice cracked. "The will, the financial transfers. He told me if I didn't, he would cut me off from everything. My home, my security." I was afraid. I glanced at her, tears gathering in her eyes. For years, I had painted her silence as complicity, but now I saw the truth. She had been living under his thumb, her choices carved by fear. "I'll testify," she whispered, "if it means freeing you, if it means freeing me." The weight of her words filled the car. For the first time in decades, she had chosen me over him. When the case reached court, her testimony became the final nail in my father's coffin. The judge restored my rightful inheritance, declared the fraudulent documents void, and issued a protective order forbidding further harassment. For the first time, I could breathe without waiting for the next attack. But victory carried a bitter taste. My father lost everything: status, fortune, allies. My sister vanished into silence, her once loud accusations drowned by her own shame. Justice had been served, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life circling their downfall. I wanted to build something different, something better. So when the court asked how I wished to structure the restored inheritance, I made a choice that stunned everyone. I proposed the creation of a transparent family trust, not for those who had betrayed me, but for the elders and children who had been neglected. Funds would be managed with outside oversight, every dollar accounted for. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about breaking the cycle. So let me ask you, what does justice mean to you? Is it about punishing until there's nothing left? Or is it about creating a path forward no one can corrupt again? The ruling made headlines, not just because of the scandal, but because of the unusual resolution. Daughter restores family funds to community after fraud exposed. Reporters called it magnanimous. I didn't think of it that way. I thought of it as survival, not just mine, but for those who deserved better than the rot we had endured. Days later, as I sifted through emails, one caught my eye. It wasn't from a lawyer or a bank. It was an invitation. We would be honored if you would speak at our upcoming conference. Topic: Escaping Toxic Families. It begins with boundaries. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady. For years, my voice had been silenced, erased, even fabricated against me. Now, for the first time, people wanted to hear the truth directly from me. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The silence after the court's decision was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't the suffocating silence of a family dinner filled with tension, nor the punishing silence of being excluded from photos and conversations. This was a silence that tasted of relief. For the first time in years, no one called me at 2 a.m. demanding money. No one berated me for being a disappointment. No one threatened me with disinheritance or disgrace. The storm had broken, and I was left standing. The first step in building my new life was clear. Boundaries, real ones. Not the invisible lines I once whispered in my head, and then erased the moment they protested. No, these were written in stone. I informed my lawyer to establish a permanent no-contact order with my father. If he needed to communicate, it would be through legal channels only, and even then, only if it was absolutely necessary. As for my sister, I allowed limited contact, but strictly mediated through lawyers. Every email, every message went into the vault of evidence I now maintained, secured with two-factor authentication and encrypted backups. My digital life became my fortress. I curated an information diet. I stopped scrolling through their social media, stopped asking relatives for updates. Their narratives no longer had the power to pierce my skin. Instead, I filled my feeds with stories of resilience, with communities of survivors, with people who had turned pain into purpose. But boundaries were not just digital or legal, they were emotional. That lesson came to me one morning as the sun began to rise. I stood barefoot on my balcony, the city humming awake beneath me. The sky blushed pink and gold, and I pulled out a small notebook. Every morning I wrote 10 things I was grateful for. My breath, my freedom, my friends, my therapist, the aunt who chose truth, the strangers online who believed me, the courage I hadn't known I carried. Gratitude, I discovered, wasn't about ignoring the wounds. It was about acknowledging that, despite them, I still had light. That morning, as I closed my notebook, my phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unfamiliar number. I saw your story. I'm trapped in something similar. Could I borrow your light? I pressed the phone to my chest, my heart aching and swelling all at once. It wasn't just my fight anymore. My scars had become a lantern for someone else, lost in their darkness. From there, the idea took shape. I began mentoring quietly, at first just responding to emails and messages from people who found me after the trial. Some were drowning in financial manipulation, others in emotional abuse. I didn't offer easy fixes. I shared strategies, steps, and the reminder that they weren't alone. Soon, with the help of my lawyer, therapist, and Aunt Grace, we established the Lighthouse Fund. Its mission was simple: to provide resources for victims of toxic families to reclaim their lives. Financial literacy workshops, legal consultations, therapy stipends. The very things I had once needed most. My career flourished in parallel, but I chose moderation. Opportunities came flooding in after my story spread. Invitations to lead projects, to expand my company, to become the face of survival. But I refused to let ambition consume me the way obligation once had. I took what aligned with my values and let the rest go. My Saturdays belonged to something gentler, a pottery class with my mother. At first, it was awkward. We sat side by side, hands shaping clay, silence heavy between us. But over time, the rhythm of the wheel softened the edges. My mother began speaking in fragments, about her fear, about the years she spent convincing herself silence was protection. Therapy was helping her untangle the knots. And for the first time, I felt we were building something together, not on the ruins of the past, but on the promise of change. One afternoon, as I lifted a vase from the wheel, she touched my arm. "Emily," she said, her voice trembling, "you didn't just save yourself, you saved me." Tears blurred my vision, but I smiled. We're saving each other. Life wasn't perfect. Healing wasn't linear. There were days I woke with old echoes in my head, the sting of words I could never unhear. But I no longer believed those words defined me. I no longer needed to prove my worth to people who thrived on diminishing it. I defined myself. At the end of each week, I stood again on my balcony, notebook in hand. I wrote down not only gratitude, but also boundaries I reinforced. Boundaries with people, with work, even with myself, because victory wasn't about being untouchable. It was about being unbreakable in my softness, my humanity, my choice to live fully. So I'll ask you, what boundary will you set in the next 24 hours? What line will you draw to remind yourself that your life is yours and no one else's to command? Because here is what I've learned. Winning isn't about becoming cold or ruthless. It isn't about turning into the very people who hurt you. True victory is living warmly, but wisely, carrying love with one hand and a shield with the other. And so, when people asked me what my story meant, I told them this. Victory is not cold, it is warmth with boundaries.